Hello, everybody. Welcome to Easel Live. We are coming to you today just before the holidays hit. This will be our last Easel Live of 2016. We really appreciate everybody who's been a part of it so far. It's been a big adventure for us. We've had a lot of fun putting together these projects and these videos for you, and hopefully we can continue this in 2017. We're still trying to figure out how we're going to move this particular part of our customer experience forward. So again, your feedback is always welcome. If you like seeing these kinds of videos, if there's something in particular you want to see, please let us know. Today, we're going to be learning how to put pieces together. And I know that sounds like a very simple concept, but there are a couple different ways in which you can do that. And we want to share two ways that we find are very easy, especially thank you to the apps that you can use in Easel that make it easy to put any pieces together that you would want in multiple ways. So we're going to walk through some of those techniques with you today. But first, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping just to kind of share all of our resource while people are still joining us. We know, we like to start on time, but just as people are kind of getting in here, I want to run over a few things with you. The first thing I want to show you is that you can access all of our Easel Live videos now in a section that we have joined, or we've put on the support center called classes. You can go to the support center. If you're on the homepage of the support center, you can scroll down here. These are all the Easel articles. So we've got a few tutorials in here, but we've also got a page here called classes. Right now, we've just got the holiday garland up, but we're getting the other ones loaded as well. So keep an eye out for those. The great thing about these classes pages in the support center is that you can get the project itself. You can download the original project for what we worked on here in Easel Live, and you can also share your remake on the forum. We really like seeing how people contribute and do things with the tutorials that we share with you. The video is also here as well that you can access. But if you go to the forum, we have the project section of the forum, which is where we've been sharing these Easel Live projects with everybody. You can see here's the one that we put together today for Easel Live, the interlocking candle holders. We've also got the ones down here for the cutting board and the ornament template. You can see this one is fantastic. There's been a lot of people who have contributed to this particular thread with all different kinds of ideas. So again, this is an awesome place to share what you've made based on what you've learned here in Easel Live. And we love seeing all the different ideas that people come up with. So please feel free to use the forum as a way of sharing the projects that you make from these tutorials that you've taken with us. The other thing I want to show you is that if you ever are trying to find a previous Easel Live video, we do have a playlist on our YouTube channel. Just go to our YouTube channel here, and there's a playlist with all the Easel Live videos in here. We're looking at shortening the videos a little bit just to make them a little bit more concise and easy to view after watching the live tutorial. But for now, you can just access the full videos on our YouTube page. Lastly, if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat on the side of the screen there. My friends Sam and Paul are working on that, and they will be happy to answer your questions as we go. You can also feel free, if there's time at the end, I will address questions at the end of the video. But for now, let's go ahead and stick with the chat for all of your questions, and hopefully we can get everything answered. So I think that about does it for all of our little housekeeping that we're going to do. I have a few projects I want to show you that we're going to be working on today. This is my first time ever doing anything that stands up. my design so far in Easel and with my carving and my CNC have been very, very simplistic. So I am not new. I'm new to these kinds of techniques, and I can promise you it's a lot easier than I ever thought it could possibly be. So here's my first project that I made, this little sled on a stand, and this is using dog bones. Dog bone is a specific kind of cut that we will go over as we start talking about how to interlock pieces together this way for standing up. But we also have a couple cool interlocking projects that we want to do. We want to show you these little guys, these candlestick holders. We'll show you how to make these as well. And these interlock in a slightly different way that they just slide apart like this. So we will show you how to use the Interlocker app to get these notches to help push your pieces together. So that's going to be what we're going to cover today. These materials that I've got to share with you are all made out of expanded PVC, which you can purchase on our website. It's an incredibly easy to carve material. It actually looks kind of cool and modern in my opinion. It comes in a lot of different colors. So we've got red, green, yellow, blue, gray, white, and it's perfect for this time of year for doing these kinds of festive things since we have the red and the green and the white. And it's also so cheap. This is probably one of the cheapest materials you can buy for what you get out of it. It's like $3 a sheet. It fits in Carvey, fits on your X-Carve, and it's perfect for these kinds of quick things that you got to do last minute since the holidays are approaching. So we're going to go over some of those interlocking tools today. If you have Easel open, that's awesome. I'm going to be using Easel to kind of show you some things. We're going to cover masking, which is something we did in the ornament demonstration if you were there for that. We're also going to talk about using exact dimensions in Easel because interlocking is really important that you get exact measurements for these kinds of projects because everything needs to fit together nice and tightly. You don't want anything too loose and you don't want to be doing a lot of sanding to try and get your pieces to fit after they carve. So we're going to talk about how to get those exact measurements in Easel using inside cuts and outside cuts and making sure that everything is good to go. We're also going to talk about the importance of calipers. I'm not sure if everybody out there has a set of digital calipers that they use when they're measuring their materials, but I think after today, you're going to see why they're really important for doing these kinds of projects. So without further ado, let's go ahead, let's get into Easel here, and let's start designing. All right, so here's going to be my Easel template here. We're going to talk about a few things to get started. We're going to kind of work on 3 different projects here and work our way through those different techniques as we go. So we'll kind of build upon the different ideas and you can see how you can make 3 different projects using the same types of techniques. So to start with, we're going to make a little tree that fits into the base. I kind of just showed you an example of that. So let's start with naming my project. I'm just going to call it Tree and Base, just to make it nice and easy for me to remember. And before I do anything, since I've never do this when I'm supposed to, I'm gonna go ahead and get all my materials set up so that I don't have to make any changes right before I'm ready to carve. So in this case, as I said, we're gonna be using expanded PVC, great material, easy to carve, and your machine's gonna get through it really quickly. So great for getting down nice, quick jobs. I'm also gonna go ahead and change my bit size. We did use straight cut 1/8 inch bits for all of these projects. It works really well on the PVC, so that is gonna be what I select my bit as. And all of the pieces that we made here today are all made with 1/4 inch thick PVC. Now, that being said, we're gonna get back into that in just a minute here, but again, digital calipers, great way to go. I'll just show you really quickly, just so you know what I'm talking about. These are calipers, and they give you incredibly exact measures. You can set them in millimeters or inches. These are the ones that we happen to sell and that we have all around the office, but they're great for getting really exact measurements. Now, why is that important for these kinds of projects? Well, the reason is, in order, dropping everything today. Okay, the reason it's really important is because these slots that we have in the base of the material or the base of the project that we're going to be carving for this have to be the exact, the hole has to be exactly the same as the thickness of the material. That's so when this fits into the slot, it fits nice and snug. You can see it's got a really good hold. It's not too loose, it's not too tight, and it's hard to get those kinds of exact things without using an app or a really exact measurement. So even though I was told when I purchased this item that it was a 1/4 inch thick, there's always a little bit of variance in materials. Nothing is ever precise. So I'm gonna use my digital calipers, and it's a very easy thing. I just kind of cinch it here, and I'm getting a reading here of 0.225, and it's kind of hard to see. Yeah, 0.221 is the actual thickness of this material. So it's always good when you're measuring, measure at a few different points to get a good average, 0.223 and 0.239. So you can see, even on this piece of material, there's a lot of variance. So it's good to just kind of make sure that you keep it so that it's a good average of the measurements that you're getting around a piece of material. So for this particular project, I did use 0.23 for getting that done. So let's go back into Easel and let's go ahead and change my material thickness to be that exact measurement. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to design my tree. And you can use the icons if you'd like. We found it's kind of fun to build your own trees. So in this case, we're just using the triangles, copying and pasting them and making them a little bit bigger each time, just because it's kind of fun to do. And using these alignment tools that pop up at the top, that helps to make sure everything is going to be centered right down the middle. So you can see, here's a pretty good start of my tree here. I'm going to go ahead, click, drag, select everything, and make my tree a little bit bigger. All right, so there's my little tree. And what I'm going to do now is add the trunk of my tree. The example that I had here shows that this particular little tree that we're going to be making has a little bit of a trunk on it that just sticks right into the slot. So this is going to be what we call our base, and this piece here, which has the dog bone in it, which we will get into, is the slot that the trunk of the tree is going to go into. So those are just some important terminologies to keep in mind as we go through this. So let's go back to the tree and let's go ahead and make that trunk. In this case, I'm just going to use a simple square. And what's nice about this is you can kind of determine, you know, okay, I want like a really tiny little trunk, or I want my trunk to be a little bit wider for a little more durability. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and make sure I use an exact measurement so that it's easier for me when I produce the slot for the base. So in this case, for my tree, I'm going to make it 1.25 inches. And now I know that the width of this trunk is exactly 1.25 inches when I carve it out. So I want to leave a little bit of room for it to stick into the slot down here, but I'll leave a little bit so that you can see it sticking up. If you ever wanted to completely hide the part that you're putting into the slot, just make sure that the entire width of the notch that you're using, sorry, the entire length of the notch that you're using is the same as your material thickness. And that way, this piece will be completely inside the material slot on the base. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead, make it a little bit longer, and just one more time, I'm going to go ahead and align these pieces for me. One thing that I recently discovered in Easel that I did not know about is that we now have a right-click option, so I can select everything, right-click, and get a couple different things to do with my objects. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and combine these and make them all into one shape. So there are all my shapes. All my tree is now one continuous piece. All right, so now that I have that done, I'm going to go ahead and create the base for this tree as well. I'm going to make a round base for this tree, and it doesn't necessarily have to be very big, but I do want to make sure that it's wide enough to at least, you know, fill or have the notch in the base be the same as the tree trunk, and a little bit extra just for stability. So how do I go about getting this exact shape to be the slot for the base? Well, this is where the exact measurements in the shape menu come in handy. So you can see here, I can make the size of this square be exactly 2 inches by 2 inches as it is now. Now these dimensions are important to keep in mind when you're making these shapes, because we're going to want to account for not only the width of the trunk, but also the thickness of the material. So in this case, the width is going to be equivalent to the width of my trunk. You can see it's going to be exactly the same as my trunk size. But the height, I'm going to keep as being the thickness of the material. In this case, it's going to be that 0.23. So that is going to be my slot. I'm going to go ahead and use masking again, just to show you a visual here of what we're looking at. And I'll just show you one more time because I think it's a little bit tricky to sort of wrap your head around like why these parts have to be this way. So in order for this to be the right, I need to make sure that the material thickness, which I have here, is that height of that square that I just added. You can see how those two pieces are going to fit together once I carve it out. So that is why the height of your slot has to be the same as your material thickness to make sure you get that really snug fit. So sorry for all the visuals. I just want to make sure everyone is on the same page with me. So let's go ahead and we'll go back to Easel and we'll continue creating this design. So it would be great if I could just carve this out and have it fit. But carving is really strange at times because in order for me to carve these really sharp corners, I can't do that when my bit has a round diameter. You know, so the bit that I'm using is rounded on the ends of it. So these corners are not going to be exactly right angles. And what's going to happen if I tried to carve this out exactly as it is, these parts here would actually be smaller than I want them to be because the bit can't fit into those kinds of tight corners. You can see this visualized a little bit here when I use the simulate tool. You see how those corners are rounded and they're not actually square? That's actually going to make the shape be too small for the trunk of my tree to fit into. Instead, what I have to do is I have to use a technique called dog bone. And what the dog bone allows is it allows these corners that are really sharp to be rounded so that when the round bit cuts them out, it helps make it so that the shape will actually be this exact dimension, just with these little rounded corners so that the piece will fit in there snugly. We have a really great video about how to do dog bones and why they work, and I'll make sure that that gets shared in this Easel live video at the end of the session so that you can go ahead and check that out. It's really got some great details as to why dog bones work and how you can use them to do different projects. So before I go any farther with making this into a dog bone, I want to go ahead and make my shapes outlines. And I'll get into this in just a second. There we go. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead now. I'm gonna go into the apps. If you guys have not checked out some of these apps, you really should do so because they are awesome. And I use them all the time for all different kinds of things. And the one that we're gonna be using today is the dog bone app. So I'm just gonna do a quick search here for dog bone. And here's how the dog bone works. This part here is the bit diameter. So this is going to correspond with the bit that I'm using to carve out the projects. In this case, I'm using an 1/8 inch bit, so that 0.125 is going to be the bit that I use for carving this out. The other thing to keep in mind is this inside outside. So because the slot I am making is on the base, and the base is going to be the physical part that is cut out, and the slot is just going to be inside that piece, I want to make sure that my dog bone has those rounded corners on the outside of the piece. That means that when the piece gets carved out, these little rounded parts are going to be there for me to put the trunk of the tree inside. So now I'm going to go ahead and import this piece, and I don't need this little square anymore. I'm just going to put him over here for now. And let's go ahead and we'll put this guy, we'll use my alignment tools again to make sure it's all in place. And I also don't need tabs in this particular case because if you can see this, you will realize that what this is going to cut out is this rounded shape is going to be the chunk that's removed from the stock material that I'm carving from. And then this piece is going to be the slot inside. So there's one last thing to remember when you're using dog bones and when you're cutting things out. You'll notice that with this tree, I changed my tool path to be outside. Now, why is that? There are a couple ways when you do tool paths that you can cut out a shape. If you do inside, you're going to cut on the inside of the line that you've generated. So this tree, you can see, got physically smaller, and the actual shape of my tree as you can see over here, is going to be the part that is inside this black line. So only the white space inside this black line. Well, that means that my trunk is actually smaller now than what I had set it to be at. If I do on path, the bit will actually split the line that I've drawn. So it's a little bit bigger, but you can see that I'm still losing the full width of the tree trunk that I had determined when I built the shape. So for cutting out these shapes, I want to make sure that this is set to be outside. Now you can see from here what that's going to do to my tree. The white part is going to be the part that I keep, and because I've set the bit to cut on the outside of the path, it is going to keep all of the shape that I've drawn. So I'll just show you one more time. You can see how when it's set to inside, the tool path is inside the shape that I've drawn, but because I want to keep the full shape that I've drawn, I've got to set it to outside. And you can see the physical difference in terms of how big my tree got. Now it gets a little bit more confusing when I start working with the base, because the base here, the base itself could be any of these things depending on how big I want it to be. For the sake of simplicity, I'm going to keep my base as set to outside so that it's the same size as what I drew it. But it's really important to consider the dog bone when you're looking at these tool paths. One reason that using outline is not going to work is because even though the only shape that I want is the blue line here that I've drawn, you can see how the tool path itself has made that black line, which is the part that my bit is going to take, is going to be wider than I want it to be. So if I tried to cut this out right now, the slot on the base is going to be too big and my piece is going to be loose inside there. It gets even worse if I set this to outside, because you can see now how ginormous my hole here is going to be, and that slot is going to be way too big for me to put my piece inside. So when you're using dog bones, if you're using it as a slot on a base like this, make sure that you set your tool paths to be inside. And what that's going to do is it's going to make it so that the shape that I created with the dog bone app is going to be the exact size that I need it to be. In other words, it's going to be the right width for the trunk and the right height for the material thickness. So that right there shows you how to do the tree in the base. If I really wanted to get fancy, I could probably throw a little bit of a garland in here as like a little engraving. Again, you can decorate these however you'd like. I'm all about Christmas decorations, so you can feel free to maybe add a little touch as you go here, or maybe you want to add the year to the base. Maybe that's something that you want to commemorate. So we'll just put 2016, and we can go ahead and get that engraved onto the base of my tree trunk, my tree base. There. So now when I carve that out, my tree's got a little bit of flair to it, and can go ahead and keep that for the future. Okay, so now that we've got that all done, that's sort of the first step in terms of using dog bones to connect things together. We're now going to do our next project here, which is going to be an interlocking tree. Now we got a little ambitious here, and we turned all of our interlocking trees into candlestick holders. So we do have an example from green PVC. Unfortunately, it's glued together, so I can't really show you the interlocking part of it, but you can see we even used an interlocking part on the star as well. And essentially what you're doing when you're interlocking is you're taking two identical pieces with slots or notches inside the piece, and you then slide them together. My friend John is like the interlocking guru, and even though he did his first interlocking project, he made this awesome candle holder, and I'm totally in love with it. And it's great because it's got all these dynamic parts to it, and it's all just done using the interlocking app. He designed this entire thing in Easel, and I'm going to go ahead and show you not how to make something quite this complex, even though you will have all the tools you need to build something like this when you have used the interlocking app. So this is just a small example of how the skills you use in this class can go on to do really cool things. Another great example is this reindeer. This is all interlocking. So big it can't even fit on the screen with me. These are all just interlocked pieces that you can do. You can do this exact same thing. You know, you have to draw the shapes themselves, but in terms of building something like this that is this big and this, it looks really complex, but we have all the tools for you in Easel to be able to build something that can look like this. And so I'm going to walk you through a really simple tree just to kind of help understand what interlocking is and how you can use it in future projects. So let's go back into Easel, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to make a very little simple tree. So let's go ahead. I accidentally deleted my tree from last time, so let's just build another little tree here. Copying and pasting these triangles and just making each one a little bit bigger than the last to get that nice conical shape that we know and love this time of year. And to make this easier, I'm just going to have my tree sit on the ground like this. I'm not going to add a trunk to it just because you know, I have a couple other things I want to show you. So I'm going to go ahead and use this to make my tree. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead, right click again, and I'm going to go ahead and combine these shapes here. Again, with interlocking, material thickness is really important because the notches have to be the same as your material thickness. Let me just show you this example here with this. Even though this is a candlestick, we're going to get to this next. Let me just show you why these interlocking pieces are so important. So you can see how these notches in both parts of these shapes have to go together. And in order for them to slide in correctly, we have to make sure the notch is the same as the notch width is the same as the material thickness so that you get that really snug fit. If these pieces were too loose, this wouldn't hold together as well. And if they were too tight, I would never be able to get past the part where I actually have to slide the material over each other. So it's important, again, use your calipers. They're really good for getting exact material thicknesses. Make sure you have the right measurement when you go ahead and you start building these kinds of shapes, because you want to make sure you don't have to do a lot of finishing. We don't like to do more work than we have to when it comes to making, and being really precise with your measurements before you start carving is a great way to get a good final product without doing a lot of extra work. So let's go back into Easel. And with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and make sure again that my material thickness is set up to that 1/4 inch. And since I did measure it, let's go ahead and just make it exact. We'll make it that 0.23 again. I've got my material set up here for the expanded PVC, and I've got my correct 1/8 inch bit to go ahead and make these carves. So my tree here is going to be made into an interlocking app using, again, the apps menu here, and we're going to use an app called the Interlocker. So the Interlocker is great because it takes all the guesswork out of how to get two pieces to fit together. Now you'll remember I was talking about notch size. So the notch size in this particular case is equivalent to the thickness of the material. So as I talked about, my material thickness on this project is 0.23. You can see how the notch on these two shapes changed to be a little bit wider to accommodate for the thickness of the material when it carves out. I also want to make sure I change my bit size here, and since I'm using an 1/8 inch bit, we'll go ahead and knock that down to 0.125. The other cool thing about the interlocking app, which is the technique that my friend John used when he built his awesome candle holder, is that you can change where you want the slot to be on your shape. So what he had done is he had used that square and he had sort of done these offset slots and put them on different sides of different squares and was able to build a shape that way. Now for this tree, I just want a perfectly symmetrical tree. I'm going to go ahead and keep that slot right in the middle of the tree for when I put those pieces together. And now all I have to do is import these shapes. It's literally as simple as that. I'm going to put this guy over here for later. But now I have everything I need in order to build a tree where the pieces will stick together. All I have to do now when I cut this out is just have these notches will cut out correctly. You can kind of see here in the shapes here, how these notches these pieces then will just slide together. And since my notch size is the correct width, the correct thickness of my material, I will have a pretty easy time just sliding these two pieces together without any difficulty. They won't be too snug and they won't be too loose. So now that I have that done, we're gonna take it up one notch and we're gonna, not pun not intended there, we're gonna take it up a level and we're going to go ahead and turn these interlocking trees into candle holders like I was saying. So for simplicity's sake, I'm gonna go ahead and delete this. Let's go ahead and name this tree candle holder. And I'm just gonna use the same shape that I had saved over here. So now I've got my tree again. Isn't that great? And what I'm gonna do this time is I'm gonna make a notch in the top of the tree that holds the candle. Again, calipers are super helpful here because you wanna make sure that you get the correct width of your particular candle. So in this case, we ran to the store down the street and picked up some candles, and we went ahead, we used our calipers again, and we just measured the width of this candle so that when it fit into that slot, it would be a good fit. In this case, it looks like I've got, let's get it right here, right in the middle. I've got 0.832. So that's gonna be what I set this square to inside the top of my candle, my tree candle holder. So we'll go back into Easel and we will check out this square here that I was going to use to mask over the shape so that I can create that hole that I need. So I'll go back into my shape menu, and since I've got the exact width of that 0.823, and the height can kind of vary depending on what you're looking to do. One thing that's important to keep in mind is, how if you want it to go like really far down in your tree, but you don't want it to be too close to the top that your candle's not going to be very steady. So in this particular case, I'm going to be a little bit generous, and I'm going to put it about there. And again, using masking, I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now, just to make sure everything's straight, go ahead and use the align tool again to keep everything centered. And you can see now in this sort of visual right here how this is going to be the width of my candle. Now, another thing that's important to keep in mind is I have to combine these two shapes because I want to actually cut an outline of this tree. I don't want to carve the tree out of the material. I want to make sure that the piece I have is removed from the stock material at the end of the carve. So go ahead and right click, go ahead and right click here, combine these two pieces, and now I've got one piece that has the notch in the middle, the top of the tree. I'm gonna go back over here to outline, and I'm gonna set it to outside. And the reason it's really important to do outside in this case is because I wanna make sure this notch in the top is the correct width for my candle. If I'd set this to inside, you can see how much bigger my slot just got, because this blue line is where I actually want the bit to end. But because I've set it to inside, it's going to carve on the inside of the shape, and my top notch here, my top candle width just got a lot bigger. So again, by setting it to outside, you can see how the black line now falls within this blue line, and that means it's going to stay that exact width that I need it to be. So we'll zoom back out here, and I'm just going to go make sure this carves all the way down. You can use tabs if you want. I did use tabs for a lot of these projects, if only because PVC is such a great material. It's really easy to just go in, cut that out with an X-Acto knife. It saves you a lot of time in terms of not having to tape down your material and try to keep it nice and snug. And at the end, you just go ahead and slice it with that little X-Acto knife or a box cutter or whatever it is you got, and you can just get that nice smooth finish, a little bit of sanding on the edges, and you're good to go. So I'm gonna go back into my apps, and I'm gonna try and find that Interlocker app again. And again, it's important to pay attention to this notch size, right? So we found out that my material thickness was 0.23 inches thick. So I'm gonna make sure that I have that in place for my material thickness and my notch size here. And my bit size, again, is that 1/8 inch that I'm using, so I'll just go ahead and account for that as well. And now I'm gonna go ahead and import these shapes, and I am all good to go. There are my 2 trees. So when I carve this out, I've got two halves that I will slide together in these notches to make them one whole piece. And the great thing about the Interlocker app that I just want to point out is you'll see our little friend, the dog bone here, has made an appearance in the Interlocker app. So we already take care of that issue that has the problem with with sharp edges joining together. So the great thing about Interlocker, it takes the guesswork out of how to get your pieces to fit correctly because the dog bone is already implemented in the design of the app itself. So that is how to make 3 really simple, easy projects for all those last-minute gifts or holiday decorations that you need to make for the holidays. Again, you can find these projects on the forum. And what's a little bit tricky, and it's important to keep in mind, is that even though we have shared projects with you on the forum and we have project pages on our website, you got to remember that those specific designs are designed to be used with that thickness material only. If you try to replicate that design with a different material thickness, those dog bones and those notches on the Interlocker are not going to be right, because it's, as we kind of went over a lot of times today, it's really important to make sure that you keep those materials the same as your notches on the Interlocker app and the dog bone. So as much as I'd love to say just go ahead and use these templates, we had a really hard time coming up with templates for these particular projects because so much depends on the thickness of your material. So again, guys, really great, fun little projects you can do. Our favorite thing that we discovered about expanded PVC is you can paint it. And so we kind of have these like nice little 2-tone candlestick holders now. And it's a lot of fun because, you know, kids can just go ahead and paint these. These were painted with watercolor, which is maybe not the best paint to use, but you should be fine using like an acrylic paint. We kind of like the look though. It's kind of a cool little faded effect. And you can use these for all kinds of shapes. I showed you that reindeer. That's a really cool thing you can do with interlocking. If you have any other questions about any of these apps, or if you want to just like play around with some different things, I highly suggest checking out the app section at Easel. It's a great place to go to just kind of get your brain working and thinking about some of the different things. Again, if you have questions, feel free, add those in the chat. We will be on chat for a little bit longer. I wanted to thank everybody again for being a part of this awesome experiment that we've been taking part of for the past few weeks. It's been a lot of fun for us. I've done more carving than I think I have in my entire life as we've been trying to get things ready for you guys and figuring out how to do everything really exactly so before we share that information with you. If you have any questions about anything you've seen, feel free to reach out to us too at help@inventables.com, HELP@inventables.com. I will be there probably answering your email. I work in the customer success department, so I'd be happy to work with you there. And we love feedback. Again, this is the last Easel Live of 2016. So if there's something you want to see in 2017, if you think these videos are awful and you never want to see my face again, that's important to know too. If you want to learn different techniques, or if you have a particular project that you think you might need some help on, we're always looking for ideas on how to teach different things, both in Easel and with CNC carving. So with that, that's everything we have for you today. I hope everyone has a wonderful season of holiday cheer and a very, very happy new year. Again, we'll still be on chat for a few more minutes if you want to go ahead and reach out to us there. And you can always feel free to reach us at help@inventables.com. Thank you again for joining us, and hopefully we see you in 2017. Thanks again, everybody.